every single memory you hold dear, your ability to perform complex calculus, the profound emotional resonance you feel when you're listening to a piece of music, and even your entire perception of reality right this very second. I mean, all of it.
All of it.
Yeah. All of it is being powered by the exact same amount of electricity it takes to run the dim little light bulb inside your refrigerator.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It's wild. Today, we're looking at why human consciousness is fundamentally starved for power, and what happens when we try to force that dim little bulb to shine like a sun. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, the human mind is an absolute marvel, obviously, but it is defined by a rather shocking scarcity. We are basically operating under an incredibly strict energetic bottleneck.
Right, and if you are joining us today, you are probably the kind of person who is always looking for that next big aha moment. You want to understand the heavy machinery operating behind the curtain of your daily life.
But, without getting bogged down in an avalanche of impenetrable academic jargon.
Exactly. You want the insight, you want the clarity, and you want to actually understand how it applies to the way you experience the world. We totally get that. So today, we are pulling from a truly phenomenal piece of source material that tackles this exact kind of hidden machinery.
It's a fantastic piece.
It really is. It's a post from a cross-disciplinary Substack called SpiralSeekr, and it was actually just published today, April 29th, 2026. The piece is titled "The Energy of Consciousness: Pushing Biological Limits."
And what's fascinating here is that this specific source forces a massive paradigm shift in how we approach the concept of the mind.
How so?
Well, typically, when society discusses consciousness, the conversation inevitably drifts into the abstract, right? We treat the mind as a philosophical concept or a psychological phenomenon or even something kind of ethereal and completely detached from physical laws.
Right, like it's just floating out there in the ether.
Exactly. But the author of SpiralSeekr takes a scalpel to that assumption. They demand that we look at consciousness strictly as a physical, energetic equation.
So treating it like a machine.
Yeah, it becomes a matter of thermodynamics and caloric run.
Yeah.
Just as much as it is a matter of profound thought.
Which is such a cool framing. So our mission for this deep dive is to really explore this fascinating intersection of technology, biology, and philosophy by asking what seems, on the surface at least, like a deceptively simple question.
Which is?
Why does expanding the human mind take so much physical energy, and what does that actually mean for our future global connectivity?
It is a huge question.
It is. Okay, so let's unpack this foundation the author builds. They start by borrowing a concept from astrophysics, which, I have to admit, threw me for a loop initially. They bring up the Kardashev scale.
Right, the Kardashev scale.
Now, for anyone who hasn't been down a late-night astrophysics internet rabbit hole recently, the Kardashev scale was designed to measure how advanced a hypothetical alien civilization might be, based entirely on the total amount of energy they can harness.
Exactly, it's a cosmic measurement.
Right, so a Type I civilization uses all the energy of its home planet. A Type II harnesses the total power of its entire star, usually through something like a Dyson sphere. And a Type III commands the energy of its entire galaxy.
It's massive scale stuff.
Huge. But wait, hold on. The Kardashev scale measures how much energy a civilization produces or harnesses from its environment. The human brain just, consumes energy from whatever sandwich we ate for lunch.
Right.
So isn't bringing in an astrophysics scale fundamentally flawed for an article about biological neurology?
Well, the brilliance of the author's framing lies precisely in that subversion. They are deliberately taking this massive cosmic scale, one designed to measure the output of literal suns and galaxies, and flipping it completely inward.
Flipping it inward. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, they are asking us to view the human brain not merely as a single fleshy organ sitting in the skull, but as an advanced civilization of 86 billion neurons.
Wow, 86 billion.
And just like any planetary civilization, its capabilities, its internal growth, its infrastructure, and its very survival are entirely dictated by the amount of power it can extract, manage, and distribute.
A civilization of neurons. So instead of looking outward at how much solar power we can capture, we're looking inward at how these 86 billion little citizens divide up the resources we give them.
That is the core premise, yeah. The source is establishing that biology is subject to the exact same unforgiving laws of resource management as a developing nation.
That makes total sense.
Right, so if a civilization wants to build a massive new high-speed rail network, or in the brain's case, forge a massive new network of synaptic connections. To understand a complex philosophical concept, it requires a massive surge of raw power.
Which brings us back to that staggering data point from the text that I opened the show with. When you measure the power consumption of this incredibly complex civilization inside our heads.
The one that gave us the Renaissance, the Apollo missions?
Exactly. The network that gave us quantum mechanics, it runs on a baseline of about 20 watts of continuous power.
To contextualize that 20-watt budget, your skeletal muscles can consume hundreds of watts during intense physical exercise.
Hundreds of watts.
Oh, yeah. But the brain, which accounts for only about 2% of your body weight, is continuously hoarding roughly 20% of your body's total resting energy expenditure just to maintain that 20-watt output.
But 20 watts is still almost nothing. I mean, I have LED light bulbs in my living room that use more power than the organ that invented them. It's an absolute marvel of biological efficiency.
It is efficient, but that efficiency comes at a profound, unseen cost. How does the brain manage to produce the entirety of a seamless human experience on a power budget that can barely illuminate a refrigerator?
That is the big question.
The text gives us a very clear, mechanical answer. It survives through ruthless, aggressive filtering.
Right, because if it didn't filter, we would basically blow a biological fuse.
Exactly. The mechanism of survival for this neural civilization is a draconian suppression of data. Every single second, your brain is bombarded by billions of bits of raw sensory information.
Like what?
Well, you have the ambient hum of the air conditioner, the exact microscopic pressure of your socks against your skin, the subtle shifts in light reflecting off the wall across the room, the scent of dust.
And that's just the stuff outside of us.
Right. Internally, you have the ceaseless churn of your own subconscious processes, memory retrieval, and physiological monitoring. It's an astronomical amount of data.
So if your brain actually attempted to process all of that information at the conscious high-definition level simultaneously, what would happen?
The energy demand would instantly skyrocket far beyond that 20-watt limit.
Because it takes physical energy to process all that.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Processing data in the brain requires the firing of action potentials, which are electrical impulses traveling down neurons. Generating those impulses requires pumping sodium and potassium ions across cell membranes.
Okay, getting a little biological here.
Just a bit. But doing that consumes a molecule called ATP, which is the fundamental energy currency of our cells. If every neuron fired to process every single piece of sensory data, you would deplete your brain's ATP reserves in a matter of seconds.
Wow. So it would demand more energy than our biology could physically provide. But hang on a second.
Yeah.
We eat thousands of calories a day. Why can't the body just divert more of those calories to the brain when we need it? You know, like a starship captain redirecting power to the forward shields.
I love the sci-fi analogy.
Yeah.
But it's because the physical infrastructure of your biology has a hard limit. Neurons run on glucose and oxygen, which are delivered via the bloodstream.
Right, the plumbing.
Exactly. The cardiovascular system is essentially a network of pipes. You can only dilate the blood vessels in the brain so much. There is a hard physical ceiling to how fast your heart can pump oxygenated blood into the skull before the vascular infrastructure just maxes out.
So you literally just can't get the fuel there fast enough.
You cannot suddenly demand a 50-watt output from a biological system that is physically plumbed and hardwired to safely sustain 20 watts.
So the brain heavily filters the information you receive to stay within that safe 20-watt envelope. It acts like the most ruthless corporate accountant in the world, strictly managing where every single fraction of a watt is allocated.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It decides what is absolutely essential for your immediate physical survival, and it aggressively throws the rest out or suppresses it into the background.
The thalamus plays a massive role here as a sensory gatekeeper. It literally blocks ascending sensory signals from ever reaching your conscious cortex.
So my brain feels my socks, but the thalamus is like, nope, don't need to think about that.
Exactly. It deems the feeling of your shirt on your back or your socks on your feet irrelevant to your survival, so it stops the signal, saves the energy.
That is so wild. Think about the last time you spent 8 uninterrupted hours intensely focused on a complex spreadsheet or trying to learn a new language or writing a dense report.
You feel exhausted.
Completely exhausted. You didn't run a marathon. You barely moved from your chair. But at the end of the day, you felt physically starved, completely wiped out, and desperate for a heavy meal and a nap.
Yeah, your brain was demanding glucose.
Right. That was you pushing right up against that 20-watt ceiling. That was your brain consuming its maximum allotted glucose just to keep those high-level cognitive circuits firing.
And this is such a crucial dynamic to understand about your daily life.
It really is. Have you ever wondered why you aren't constantly overwhelmed by every sight, sound, and thought? It's not because those inputs aren't physically bombarding you.
Because they definitely are.
They are. It's because your brain is actively ignoring almost the entire universe around you just to keep the lights on without melting the wiring.
Which brings us to a critical threshold in the SpiralSeekr piece.
Okay, where do they take it?
Well, if our baseline normal reality is defined by this 20-watt filter, what are the physiological consequences of humans deliberately trying to bypass it?
And humans absolutely love trying to bypass it. We have a long, deeply documented history across every culture of actively trying to override these biological limits.
We're obsessed with it.
We really are. The text specifically highlights 3 distinct avenues people use to artificially expand their mind: deep meditation, flow states, and psychedelics.
And when we view these 3 states through the energetic micro-Kardashev framework the author has established, the mystical veneer kind of strips away.
And we see what's actually happening.
Exactly. We see exactly what is happening under the biological hood. When people engage in these activities, they are not just having an ethereal experience. On a hard neurological level, they are forcefully dismantling their brain's natural energetic filters.
They are overwriting the accountant.
They are overriding the accountant, exactly.
Let's break these down one by one because the mechanics are just fascinating. Let's start with deep meditation. We usually think of meditation as calming the brain down, as doing less.
Right, achieving stillness.
But the source suggests it's actually about reallocating power.
Yeah, meditation is a practice of profound energy reallocation. Normally, a massive chunk of our 20-watt budget is consumed by something called the default mode network, or the DMN.
The DMN, what exactly is that?
Think of the default mode network as your brain's idling engine. It's the highly connected set of brain regions that are active when you are not focused on the outside world.
Like when you're just staring out the window on a train.
Exactly. It is the network responsible for your inner monologue, your daydreaming, your anxieties about the future, and your rumination on the past. And it is incredibly energy intensive.
So it's the part of the brain that generates our sense of self or ego, and it's constantly running in the background, just chewing up our limited battery.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So deep meditation actively suppresses the default mode network. By intensely focusing on a single point, like the breath or a mantra, the practitioner stars the DMN of its normal energy allocation.
Oh, wow.
And here's where the expansion happens. The energy freed up from the DMN doesn't just disappear. It becomes available for new, previously suppressed connections.
So those thalamic gates we discussed earlier.
They begin to open slightly, yeah. Practitioners report a heightened, hyper-clear perception of the present moment because the energy usually wasted on rumination is now powering high-fidelity sensory processing.
Okay, so that's meditation. What about flow states? The source mentions athletes, musicians, and coders hitting this state. This feels different from just sitting quietly on a cushion.
It is different. Flow states are a phenomenal example of transient high-bandwidth processing. In a flow state, the brain achieves a temporary state of perfect energetic harmony known as transient hypofrontality.
Transient hypofrontality. Say that 3 times fast.
I'd rather not. But basically, the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for complex decision-making, self-doubt, and time perception, is temporarily downregulated.
So the accountant is effectively locked out of the room.
Exactly. The brain diverts maximum power directly to the sensorimotor networks required for the task at hand.
That completely explains why time seems to literally vanish when you're in the zone. The part of your brain that tracks time is being starved of power, so your reflexes can just have it all.
Yes. The efficiency temporarily spikes, allowing for a level of performance and processing that feels superhuman. But it is inherently unstable, biologically speaking.
Right, because you can't hold it forever. And then we get to the most extreme example in the text, psychedelics.
The big one.
Yeah. So if meditation is reallocating the budget and flow states are locking the accountant out of the room, psychedelics sound like burning the accounting office to the ground.
That is an incredibly apt, if violent, metaphor. Yeah. Compounds like psilocybin or LSD profoundly disrupt the brain's entire routing system.
How so?
Well, they chemically bind to serotonin receptors, particularly the 5-HT2A receptors, which fundamentally alters how pyramidal neurons fire. The default mode network isn't just suppressed, it is completely dissolved.
Wow. The source describes the neurological reality of this bypass beautifully. It says that when the filters drop under these compounds, the brain starts making massive, complex connections that it normally suppresses to save energy.
Yes, regions of the brain that typically do not communicate with each other suddenly begin exchanging vast amounts of information.
So the wiring gets all crossed.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The visual cortex might start communicating directly with the auditory cortex, leading to synesthesia, where people report seeing sounds or tasting colors. The brain's topography changes from a highly compartmentalized, energy-efficient corporate hierarchy to a massively interconnected, chaotic web.
It makes me think of my smartphone.
How do you mean?
Well, our normal daily filtered life is like having the phone permanently set on low power mode.
Ah, right.
You know, the screen dims after 10 seconds, background apps are frozen, push notifications are delayed, and the processor is throttled. It's highly functional but restricted, and it's all designed to ensure the battery lasts until the end of the day.
That's a great analogy.
So engaging in deep meditation, hitting a flow state, or taking psychedelics is like deliberately going into the settings and toggling off low power mode. You instantly turn on the GPS, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi.
You open 50 heavy applications in the background.
Yes. And you crank that high-definition screen up to maximum brightness.
The smartphone analogy is highly useful because it also perfectly illustrates the inevitable physical consequence.
Right, the battery drains.
Exactly. When you turn off low power mode and open 50 apps, your phone gets physically hot. The battery degrades significantly faster. That thermal output is the equivalent of the biological exhaustion the author is talking about. Your brain is literally running hot.
That sudden influx of power and connectivity is presented in the text as a massive double-edged sword. On one hand, bypassing the filter leads to profound, life-altering insights.
Because the DMN is offline.
Right. And new neural pathways are firing, so people report experiencing a feeling of deep, transcendent connection to the universe, to others, and to themselves. They see behavioral patterns in their own lives they were previously totally blind to.
They see these patterns because the neurological blinders are literally off. The evolutionary filtering system designed to keep them solely focused on immediate survival has been disabled, allowing them to process a much wider spectrum of reality.
But then we hit the brutal biological reality check in the text. The author focuses specifically on the physical aftermath of these experiences. They use the word exhaustion.
And they mean it literally.
Yeah. After a deep psychedelic journey, or even a multi-hour flow state coding a new piece of software, people are left feeling completely hollowly drained. Why does opening your mind exact such a severe physical toll? We know it uses more ATP, but what does that actually do to the body?
Well, the exhaustion is multifaceted. Firstly, you have acute ATP depletion in the neurons, which leaves the cells physically incapable of firing at normal rates until they recover.
So they just need time to recharge.
Right. Secondly, sustaining that level of high bandwidth processing demands an excessive metabolic response. Your liver actually has to dump stored glycogen into the bloodstream to keep your blood sugar levels up.
Wow, just to feed the brain.
Yes. Your heart rate variability changes. The physical infrastructure of your brain, particularly the glial cells that clean up the metabolic waste produced by active neurons, becomes completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of cellular exhaust generated by this hyperactivity.
So you are basically drowning your own brain in the metabolic waste of its own profound thoughts.
That is exactly what is happening. The brain simply wasn't built to run on overdrive constantly. The physical infrastructure cannot support it indefinitely.
It's just not meant to do that.
Right. This is exactly why these altered states, these moments of expanded consciousness, are strictly inherently temporary.
Yeah.
You physically cannot hold that state. Your biology forces a return to the 20-watt baseline, a return to the filter, to prevent catastrophic cellular burnout.
Which leads us to a massive pivot in the source material. So far, we've only been talking about individual brains, one skull, one 20-watt budget.
Right, a closed system.
But SpiralSeekr takes this hard biological limit and asks us to scale it up to the ultimate sci-fi ambition. What happens when we take this human desire for high bandwidth connection and try to apply it to the entire human race?
This is where it gets incredibly ambitious.
Yeah, they introduce the concept of a planetary mind, or a true biological global consciousness. A hive mind.
The planetary mind is the ultimate ambition of many utopian technologists and philosophers.
Yeah.
They envision a future where humanity is deeply, constantly connected at the level of raw thought and profound feeling, completely bypassing the clumsy, low-bandwidth mediums of language or screens.
But reading this, I have to admit, I had to stop and fundamentally question the logistics of that vision.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if we just established, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it physically drains the glucose and ATP of a single person to simply lower their own internal filters during a deep meditation for a single hour, I mean, how on earth could a biological brain possibly connect to a global network?
It's a huge leap.
We just said the brain actively ignores 99% of its own living room just to survive. How could it process the input of billions of other minds?
The logistical friction you are pointing out is the exact climax of the author's argument. You have correctly identified the staggering, insurmountable data problem.
It's just too much data.
Way too much. A global consciousness does not mean sending a telepathic text message. True hive mind connectivity requires the instantaneous, empathetic, and cognitive processing of continuous streams of consciousness from billions of distinct nodes.
Let's actually quantify that for a second because the numbers are crazy.
Right.
Human speech transmits data at roughly 39 bits per second.
Which is incredibly slow.
It is. That's why it takes me a minute to explain a feeling that I experienced in a millisecond. If we bypass speech and just linked our raw neural processing power, the bandwidth would be astronomical. We are talking about terabytes of sensory and emotional data per second, per person.
Multiply those terabytes by 8 billion humans.
It breaks the brain just thinking about it.
Literally.
Yeah.
The sheer amount of caloric and electrical energy required to process that data load simultaneously is incomprehensible. If we connect this to the micro-Kardashev framework we started with, it becomes an energetic impossibility on a purely biological level.
We are trying to run the entire data load of the global internet through a 20-watt processor running on a bagel.
Exactly. The system would instantly crash. Our current biological brains are completely, fundamentally unequipped to handle that kind of constant, high-level processing. The vascular infrastructure is inadequate.
The plumbing?
Right. The mitochondrial density is inadequate. The ATP synthesis rate is inadequate. Everything falls short.
It's the ultimate, undeniable, grim conclusion for anyone hoping humanity will just naturally, biologically evolve into a telepathic, unified hive mind. The text makes it absolutely clear.
And what's the conclusion?
The inevitable outcome of trying to force that amount of planetary data through our organic, meat-based hardware isn't transcendence. It is rapid, fatal biological burnout. A 20-watt processor simply cannot compute the existence of 8 billion other 20-watt processors.
Which brings us to the pivotal technological transition in the source's argument.
Okay, lay it out for us.
If our intrinsic evolved biology sets an unbreakable physical ceiling on our expansion, and yet we still harbor the evolutionary ambition to reach that higher state of global connection, we have no choice but to look outward.
We have to build something.
We must invent external solutions to shoulder the immense energetic load that our bodies cannot carry.
So we finally arrive at the core realization. The author spells it out as a hard, unavoidable truth. Our physical bodies are the bottleneck. We are the weak link in our own evolutionary ambition.
The 20-watt biological limit is the ultimate roadblock to the next stage of human cognitive evolution. And the proposed solution in the SpiralSeekr text is a radical shift toward deep technological intervention.
What kind of intervention?
Specifically, the author points to the necessity of advanced neural interfaces and planetary-scale artificial intelligence.
And this profoundly changes how we need to think about these emerging technologies. When we read the news today, we usually talk about AI and brain-computer interfaces, things like Neuralink, as tools to make us smarter.
Right, cognitive enhancement.
Yeah, to help us calculate math faster, or search the internet directly with our thoughts, or control robotic limbs. We view them as tools of convenience. But according to this source, it's not just about intelligence or convenience at all. It is fundamentally about fuel.
That is the most crucial distinction in the entire piece. We must reframe our understanding of AI. The technology is absolutely required to do the cognitive heavy lifting, because our organic bodies literally lack the caloric and electrical fuel to power sustained, hyperconnected higher consciousness.
We just don't have the batteries for it.
We physically cannot eat enough food, and our hearts cannot pump enough blood to metabolize the energy required to sustain a planetary mind.
So AI and neural laces cease to be just fancy tools or smart search engines. They become our external battery packs. They become the external non-biological processors for the human mind.
Exactly. The hypothetical advanced AI network would handle the massive data rendering, It would consume the megawatts of electrical power required to collate, filter, and process the thoughts and feelings of billions of connected individuals.
So the AI does the exhausting part.
Yes. The artificial network does the exhausting, high-bandwidth processing in the cloud, utilizing external energy grids. It then feeds only the synthesized, manageable, deeply profound results back into our biological brains, carefully keeping the physical input within our safe 20-watt conscious experience.
We basically offload the immense physical and energetic burden of enlightenment to the machines. The machines burn the megawatts so our brains don't have to.
It's outsourcing consciousness processing.
That is wild. It's a completely different way of looking at our technological trajectory. But it leads perfectly into the final lingering question that the author poses at the very end of the piece. And I have to say, it is a massive philosophical landmine.
Oh, it really is.
If reaching a higher state of consciousness, if achieving a true, connected planetary mind requires us to seamlessly merge with machines just to handle the raw energy load, will we still be experiencing the world as humans or as something entirely fundamentally new?
The author is challenging the very definition of the human experience here. It forces us to reflect deeply on what makes us who we are.
Are we just our limits?
That's the question. Is being human intrinsically tied to our biological limits? Are we fundamentally defined by our 20-watt ceiling? Our entire culture, our art, our social structures are built around the fact that we have limited energy, limited time, and limited cognitive bandwidth.
So true.
If you permanently remove that physical constraint, if you eliminate the biological vulnerability and the exhaustion of deep thought by offloading it to a machine, do you fundamentally alter the nature of the entity experiencing that consciousness?
It's something I really want you to mull over today as you go about your life, maybe while you're staring at that refrigerator light bulb. Think back to those moments of profound insight we discussed earlier.
The meditation, the flow states.
Right. The breakthroughs in deep meditation, the exhilarating rush of a flow state, the paradigm-shifting realizations of a psychedelic experience. The text points out that those moments are profound in large part because they are exhausting.
Because they cost us something.
Because they require sacrifice. They're incredibly meaningful because they are temporary, hard-won contrasts to our normal, heavily filtered 20-watt daily lives.
The contrast is what gives it value.
Exactly. So let's extrapolate this to the author's technological future. If we bypass the biological filter completely, if we have an advanced AI neural interface seamlessly providing infinite external energy for a permanently sustained, effortless, high-bandwidth state, would it even feel like enlightenment anymore?
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
Or, by completely removing the physical exhaustion, by erasing the biological limits, do we accidentally strip away the very friction that makes those moments of deep connection feel meaningful in the first place? If your mind never runs out of battery, do you ever truly appreciate the power of the light?
That's the ultimate paradox.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of our own minds. Keep questioning your limits, keep looking for the machinery behind the curtain, and we will catch you next time.